A machete blade flashed inches from Ed Stafford's face, close enough for him to see the nicks along the edge. The men blocking the path didn't yell. They didn't have to. Their bodies said it all. Shoulders squared, eyes flat, hands relaxed around steel, as if violence was simply the next step in a routine. Behind Ed, the jungle pressed in with no clear way back. In front of him was the only route he had left, forward, along the line of a river so vast it could swallow a map. He lifted his palms, slow, and spoke carefully, choosing words that might keep him alive long enough to take another step. Ed wasn't on a tour. He was an English former British Army officer who had decided to do something that sounded straightforward until you tried it. Walk from the farthest source of the Amazon to the Atlantic Ocean, on foot, following the river's course as faithfully as the land would allow. It was an idea built on stubbornness more than comfort, and from the first day it demanded payment in sweat, fear, and endurance. He began on the Pacific coast of Peru on April 2, 2008, with a friend, Luke Collier. Before they could even touch the Amazon, they had to earn the starting line. The headwaters weren't a single obvious point. They were high in the Andes, tied to meltwater, ravines, and competing claims. Ed and Luke pushed inland and climbed into altitude, where breathing became work, and every pack strap burned into the shoulders. They trekked toward the region associated with the Amazon source near Nevado Mismi, determined to begin where the river truly began, not where it became famous. Once they dropped from the mountains toward the first true threads of water, the jungle took over. Progress became a daily negotiation with terrain that wanted to stop them. Paths vanished, rivers split and braided, vegetation locked around their legs. Supplies ran low faster than expected, and the dream of completing the journey in a year began to collapse under the weight of reality. They would spend hours gaining a mile, cutting and pushing, then lose that gain to a dead end that forced them to backtrack and try again. After about 3 months, Luke left. The pace, the pressure, and the sheer grind of it had exposed what this walk really was. With Luke gone, Ed faced a choice that would define the entire expedition. He could stop and go home, or he could keep walking alone into a wilderness that punished mistakes. He kept going. Going alone changed everything. Alone, every injury mattered more. Every wrong turn cost more. He moved through settlements where his presence drew suspicion, and through stretches where there was no one at all. He filmed what he could, not for vanity, but because proof mattered. If he succeeded, people would question it. If he died, the footage might be the only record of where he had gone. In August of 2008, Ed found the partner who would make the rest of the journey possible. He met Gadiel Cho Sanchez Rivera, a local man with river knowledge, patience, and practical toughness. Cho was supposed to help for only a few days. Instead, he stayed. The two men became a unit, not because they were alike, but because the Amazon punished anyone who tried to face it alone. Cho read the land the way Ed read a compass. Ed planned and filmed. When one faltered, the other pulled. The farther they traveled, the more the Amazon revealed itself as a moving maze. In some places, the river was a narrow, violent channel cutting through green walls. In others, it opened wide, turning into a broad, slow force that made the far bank feel unreachable. Following it meant constant detours around swamps, private land, steep banks, and tributaries that forced them inland and back again. They crossed flooded ground where each step sank and threatened to swallow a boot. They hacked through thickets until their hands cramped from gripping blades, and their shoulders ached from pushing through resistance that never ended. Food became a constant problem. Resupply was irregular and money was always tight. When they had something, they rationed. When rations stopped meaning anything, they fished when they could and ate what they could find. But nothing was simple. Catching a meal took time and energy they didn't have. When local people helped, It could mean the difference between another day of walking and collapse. But help was never guaranteed. Some people were generous. Others saw outsiders as threats or opportunities. At times, Ed and Cho were held up at gunpoint. In other moments, the weapons were bows or machetes, and the threat was the same. A wrong word could turn a tense encounter into a disaster. Sickness was relentless. Tropical infections and parasites weren't dramatic in the way movies frame danger. They were slow, humiliating, and grinding. Fevers stole strength. Skin broke down. Small cuts turned serious because nothing stayed clean for long. When Ed pushed too hard, the jungle answered with exhaustion that felt like the body shutting down. They kept walking anyway, because stopping didn't mean safety. Stopping meant running out of food. Stopping meant being stuck in a place where the next problem could find you faster than you could find help. There were stretches where isolation did more damage than hunger. Weeks blurred into the same cycle of cutting, walking, negotiating, and sleeping. When they reached a town, noise and electricity felt unreal, like stepping into a different life for a few hours before being forced back into silence and distance. Ed kept documenting because giving the suffering a purpose was one of the few ways to keep moving. When money ran out, he tried to keep the expedition alive with whatever he could manage, sharing updates, asking for support, and turning survival itself into the reason people might help him continue. The danger wasn't only natural. In remote regions, rumor moved faster than facts. Ed could become a target simply by arriving at the wrong time, when a community was tense or when outsiders were already suspected of wrongdoing. He was detained and questioned, accused of crimes he had not committed, held while authorities decided whether he was a threat. Each delay wasn't just frustrating, it was dangerous. Every lost day meant more food, more exposure, more chances for something to go wrong. When he was released, the relief was brief. The only real safety was movement, and movement always came with risk. By the time they crossed into Brazil, the scale of what they had already endured was hard to explain. They had been walking for years. The river's middle and lower reaches posed their own problems: vast distances, endless bends, and long corridors of land that offered no shortcuts. The goal remained simple in theory: reach the mouth of the river, but the route demanded patience that bordered on obsession. There were days when the only progress was refusing to stop, placing one foot, then the next, while the world around them offered no comfort and no guarantees. On August 9th, 2010, after 860 days, Ed and Cho reached the end. Near the mouth of the Amazon, the water no longer looked like a river so much as a moving sea. Ed stepped into the Atlantic and finished a journey recognized as the first walk of the Amazon's full length, covering roughly 4,345 miles along the river's course, with additional distance required to reach the source from the Pacific side. The achievement looked clean on paper. The reality had been anything but. What he endured was not one heroic moment, but an accumulation. Days without enough food, illness that kept coming back, threats that forced him to talk calmly to strangers holding weapons, and the quiet pressure of isolation that made each step heavier than the last. The Amazon did not let him pass for free. He paid in time, pain, and persistence, and the proof of it was the simple fact that he reached the sea alive. Thank you for listening to Horrifying Survival Stories. Subscribe for more stories of those who faced the impossible and lived.